My name is Don Warner, and I'm here today, August the 15th, 2015, at the Finksburg Library's Farm to Fork event with the Carroll County History Project. I'm interviewing Victoria Garrettson, retired farm family member in Carroll County. Victoria, can you tell us where your farm or the farm you grew up on was located?
Yes, the farm was located in the Hampstead area. Actually, it was about 1.5 miles from Route 30, the south part of Hampstead, on a road called Houksville Road. And the farm lane itself is quite a distance back. It's 174 acres, or it was at that time. My father raised dairy cows. It was mainly a dairy farm, but he did do some cash crops. Actually, the farm started really back in 1830 when William Houck accepted as part of a land grant. It was in his family until 1850 when he died, and then his son Elias Houck took over. When that son died, the farm was put up for sale. My grandfather, John U. Leister, and my grandmother, Emma Brillhart Leister, purchased the farm at auction. At the time, they were a young couple with 2 small kids and another one on the way, who was actually my father, who was born in 1898. They also had 2 more children.
Well, that explains how long your family farmed, a long time. Tell us your earliest remembering of being on the farm. What's your earliest recall? Yeah.
My earliest recall, oh goodness. Actually, we were kind of fun running around the farm. We did have a swing set later. I do remember, of course, my father milking cows, bringing milk into the house. He had Guernsey cows, which of course gave very rich milk. We had family reunions because, of course, since it was the home place, everybody gathered. One thing that we always had was ice cream. It was kind of, well, yes, we definitely have ice cream whether we eat anything else or not. My father was actually fairly sociable, and people enjoyed coming and talking to him. Sometimes it was a city farmer who was coming and talking about, well, Jake, now what do I do? He was good friends with the county agent, Landon Burns, and Mr. Burns would come over and say, hi, Jake, how are you doing? Hey, listen, I got an idea for you. My father was very progressive, and he liked to do things right, and he did.
Well, it's fair to say, then, that you loved growing up on a farm.
Yes, I did not do a lot of farm work. I did try to learn to milk a cow, and my father felt sorry for the cow, so that took care of that. And I think I did pick corn some. When he raised peas, I would go out and pick peas, but only for a meal, because of course they were for the factory.
Well, speaking then for your father, and your brother's name is Carroll Leister?
Carroll Jacob, who's also known to the rest of the world as Jake, and then I had another brother, Stuart.
Stuart. And what do you remember them saying was the most difficult part of farming? What was the season that rolled around?
Well, it could be any season, because in the winter, if it was a big snow and you had a long lane and a lot of milk to be shipped, that could be a real problem. And in fact, I read in this book that we had to have a bulldozer come in one time, and they also had to dump milk sometimes because you have to milk the cows regardless, or they get mastitis, and then you can't ship the milk for several days. In the summer, storms that came and would knock all the wheat down, that was a problem. So I think that every season had its problems, really. When you're growing crops, sometimes you get too much rain, other times you don't get enough. So that was a problem too.
So, like kids going to school, you had to walk a distance to the school, or?
Well, actually, we went on the bus, but we walked up the farm lane, which was level 4 a ways, and then went up a hill. So we were the last ones on the school bus route. And I can remember as a little girl standing at our front window and seeing the hired man's son get on the bus, and my mother assured me that one day I would go to school, which of course I did.
You didn't know if that time would ever come. Your brothers both stayed on the farm. Now, did they call to service, or did they?
Neither one went into service. My brother Stuart did stay on the farm, and he farmed with my father. My younger brother, Jake, actually drove a truck for several years. He said he got it out of his system, but also in the winter they did mechanical work, so he learned that, and so that when they bought the farm, he could help with some mechanical work on the machinery, which is a big help financially.
In dairy farming, you were 7-day-a-week farmers, really, because the dairy had to operate on Sunday. What did you find the family finding time for social events?
Not much.
What?
My father pretty much was a stay-at-home, and for a long time I thought he was really a workaholic, but then it hit me. Oh, he's got a mortgage. We have a hired family to take care of. He's got cows. There's vet bills for that. He's got machinery, and he took that all very seriously. We did go to some family reunions, but as far as really going out together, not very much.
So you can date back to the recession, the Depression, really, and World War II. Your brothers, your father, any recall of what that was like?
Well, my father had a couple of young men working on the farm when the war broke out, and they both belonged to Company H. And he offered to defer them, and they said no, that they wanted to go. And they both came back, but neither wanted anything to do with my father. I don't have an answer for that. Maybe they were sorry they made a decision to go. I don't know. I know that one time my father raised tomatoes, and one of the teachers at school did have kids come out and help to pick them. But he kept on working, and he would go to Baltimore and get some men to come and help sometimes. Then after the war, or I guess after Germany surrendered, we of course had prisoners of war working here in Carroll County. My father had them. I came home one day from school, I guess I was about a junior, and I looked over in the hayfield, and there were these guards with their guns up. And I went into the house and said to my mother, "What is going on?" And she said, "Well, your father is having some German prisoners of war help with the hay." He had them help fairly consistently, and then he picked out the two that he liked most, and he actually could go with them and bring them back, you know, without the guard. The two he picked, it was kind of interesting, I think. One was young and was very much for the Nazi regime. The other one was older. I think Peter was in his 40s. He was Lutheran, also, as our family was, and he spoke English. So I don't think he was the best worker, but I think my father and mother enjoyed talking with him. And he was not for the Nazi Party, and they had some very good conversations. They tried to keep up after the war, but I think one of them was in the red zone, and that was pretty hard to do. And also, my mother fed them, as did many farm women, fed them everything that we ate.
I I followed your story very closely. We had the same experience when I grew up on a farm, almost identical to what you described. Your brothers were what age then during World War II?
Oh, they were young. My brother Stuart was born in 32. My brother Carroll was born in 36. So they were very young during that time.
Now about the farm, we talked about, I heard you say tomatoes. So are we taking to the canning factories? Beans?
Oh yes, there was a canning factory in Hampstead where I worked a couple of summers, as a matter of fact. And he did raise corn, peas, and tomatoes. And after a while, though, he gave that up. He, I think, preferred to do the hay and the corn for the animals. And I think he may have grown some wheat and soybeans. But it was hard to get people to pick tomatoes to suit him. You know, you don't throw the rotten ones in the basket. And actually what he would do, would go to the canning company and buy a case of the vegetables. Of course, we had to make sure the outside of it was marked because the cans weren't.
So they would like cash crops, in other words, and then later he just farmed to support the dairy.
Right.
So you became...
And he also did some farming for other people. Now, my brothers said that they did work for about 4 farms, and I know my father was off the farm working, and those were cash crops.
It is true to say that during World War II, farmers were induced to grow canning crops to feed the troops, and that's probably the change that happened when you went into tomatoes. What was your favorite time of the year on the farm? We heard about the snowstorms and...
No, I'm not a snow person.
No, but I meant, what was your...
I like the spring when the blossoms come out.
All right.
Oh. And I don't know, I think I preferred spring and summer and autumn. Autumn is fine. I love the leaves changing. Winter, I don't like cold and snow. Although I will have to say that my brother and I did use the snow sometimes when we made ice cream. And my mother would be making chocolate sauce upstairs for us so that we could have ice cream and chocolate.
So, cherry trees and berry bushes, did you kind of explore the wilderness and wild strawberries? And
we had an orchard when the farm was first purchased, but my father took that down and put it into pasture. No, we didn't really raise our own fruit. My mother would go to, as they say, the mountains to get peaches to can. And yes, we went to the grocery store. We did grow tomatoes for our own use, but my father really was most interested in getting these cows milked and fed and kept healthy.
so the children and grandchildren of your siblings and yourself, are they any thoughts about ever farming or returning to a farm? Or
Well, let's see, my grandfather did it. My father actually purchased a farm after my grandfather died. And then when my father was getting toward retirement age, my brothers bought it. However, my brother had 2 sons who really did not want to go into farming. And so the farm was also zoned light industrial, and that's how it happened to be sold.
so what is there today if I drove by your farm, what used to be?
Okay, the farm now is in contract farming, and right now the only thing that is really left is 2 shade trees where the house used to be, because when the farm was purchased, they took all the farm buildings down immediately.
So we have the memories and we have the photographs, and those are the treasures that you share.
True.
a typical day started on the farm.
A typical
What
day.
time in the morning you had dairy cattle?
My father usually got up at 5, and cows really are supposed to be milked very promptly at different times during the day, and he would do the milking. The hired man helped with that. My brothers helped with it. The hired man's sons helped with it occasionally. And then I guess they would go do work in the fields. Well, after milking, all right, my father would always come in for breakfast, and then they would go work in the fields or work on another farm. They would come back for lunch, and then they would work the farm. Milking in the afternoon was usually around 5 o'clock, and we always ate after that. And that was when my father could take a rest.
So a Sunday occasion might be church, going to church, or?
Well, Mother and I went to church, and my brothers went some. My father did not go, although his family was active in the church. He chose, well, also he was tired by the time Sunday came. And sometimes people would come visit him, and that was fine. So I never thought too much about that.
The particularly crop that your father farmed most consistently then was hay.
Oh, my father farmed practically from the time he was born. He only went to the 6th grade in school, but he could add up a whole column very easily. He was very much the dairy farmer. He raised Guernsey cows, and he showed them. This is really one of the programs that where they went and showed their cattle, and I gave my parents a tea service for their 25th anniversary, and it is on a plate that my father, silver plate that my father actually won for having the best, oh dear, cattle of that time. And he won several other plates and pictures that we distributed through the family.
So back to the story, your father and mother met one-room schoolhouse or church, or how did they?
Well, my mother lived over about 6 miles from Hampstead, and she actually went to Franklin High School. And as I say, my father went to the 6th grade, and the school that they went to was really over what is now known as Route 30. Because there was a road through the farm that went over to Route 30 on that side, which is why my grandfather wanted Houcksfield Road, please, paved, because it would be easier for him to take the milk to the train in the mornings.
Your farm was in Carroll County, and your father went to, or your mother, or lived, but she was in Baltimore County then, Franklin.
She lived in Baltimore County, and even though she was closer to Hampstead High School, her father said, I pay taxes in Baltimore County, she's going to Baltimore County School.
So they didn't know each other at school?
Oh, no. I don't know when they really knew each other. I heard the story that he dated her older sister first.
I like that, yeah. So who's the eldest child? You mentioned the 2 brothers. Are you?
Of my particular family, I'm the oldest. I was born in 31, which of course Medicare always asks you whatever doctor, date of birth. And let's say my brother was born I was February 31. My brother was born in September of 32. The month before he was born, I had the nerve to have whooping cough, so it really bothered the family quite a bit. So they insisted my mother go to the hospital to have him. And she came home saying she'd never have another baby in the hospital. So my younger brother was born at home, as I was.
That's fascinating, Victoria. You mentioned to us before the interview that you did an article, you've done some writing or publishing on farming. You want to?
Well, actually, I took a course at Carroll Community College called Creative Nonfiction, and we had to do a memoir, write about a person and a place. And for place, I of course chose the farm. And it's my memories of growing up. Things like, for example, we had the only telephone in the neighborhood, so we had a couple of people come and use the telephone. For example, the man who lived on the next farm, Mr. Garland, would come over, and Mother would do his phone calling for him. And then he would invite us to come to the strawberry patch and pick berries. So I was the one chosen, and I'd go way over to his patch and get them. And then we would have fresh sponge cake strawberries, and my mother would have milk flavored with vanilla. Supper. I know the nutritionists don't like it, but it was sure good.
It's fair to say you wrote a memoir or memories of the farm then. That's what you were taking.
Well, no, the memoir I did not do on the farm. I did that in regard to a trip that I took in Europe quite a few years ago. Okay. For the person, I chose my mother, and there is a great-great-granddaughter who is named after her, so I wrote it as a letter to Addie Jo telling her about her grandmother, how it was when she was growing up, and how she was a community person. My mother was a Sunday school teacher at St. Mark's Lutheran Church in Hampstead for over 50 years. She was in the fire auxiliary for 50 years. She was in the Women's Club for 50 years. And she and a friend had a little acting troupe. They dressed up as hillbillies, and they would go around and do this little skit for people, which I never made fun of her for, thank heaven. But she was active and lively.
Victoria, you may have stated it, but then when you left the farm, got married, what was your career then, or your husband's?
I'm sorry?
Your career then after you left the farm?
Oh, okay. I'm the one that left the farm, went to Western Maryland College, also have a master's in library science from Syracuse University. So my career was as a librarian in the Baltimore County schools for 14 years. Then I stayed home with our two daughters for several years. Went back, transition job was at Loyola Notre Dame Library as a circulation supervisor. Last 13 years of my career were at Springfield Hospital Center, first as patient librarian, and then the last 4 years I was also medical librarian. And I've been retired a long time.
It's fascinating. Would you like to add anything that we didn't question you about that you would like the people at the...
Oh, I think my brother would like you to know he still has the 1941 Farmall tractor. His family grew up on the farm, and his one son also lived on the farm, and his two daughters grew up on the farm. When my brothers bought the farm, they, of course, made a lot of improvements. My father was retiring, and he was tired by that time. And so they tried to build the dairy herd from 30 to 100. My father had built a milking parlor, and actually that was one of the first that was built. But then they expanded on it and added some buildings for the calving, heifers, whatever. And they also, again, they farmed several farms outside of the farm to keep their business going.
Was there a time on the farm when you had both horses and tractors?
Actually, there was. There's a picture in this book of my mother at around 1927 that shows her cranking up a tractor, and my grandfather's on the seat of it with my cousin and my grandmother looking on. But yes, they did have two horses that I remember, Doll and Bell. Doll was a reddish horse, Bell was a dapple gray horse. And they did use them for some things, so they used both the horses and the tractors. Of course, the boys liked the tractors better. And I never learned to drive a tractor.
Victoria, this has been indeed a pleasurable experience. On behalf of the Community Media Center, I want to thank you for coming here today to a program at the Finksburg Library, and we will gladly accept your offer to scan the material you have here
Okay.
and share it as your choice be shared with the viewers.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.